We are in Isaiah chapter 7. Isaiah chapter 7. So Isaiah has been commissioned by God in chapter 6. God has told him that he's supposed to go and preach to the people, to give them a message, especially to the southern kingdom, a message to repent and return, which is what he talks about the entire time. But God warns him that even though he's going to tell them all of this, they're not going to listen. He says, you're going to talk to the people, they're not going to hear, they're not going to listen, their hearts are going to be hard, their ears will be closed, stopped shut, filled with a bunch of nonsense. They're not going to listen to anything you say. So that is kind of a depressing commission, no doubt. But God says at the end, your job is to preach to people, they're not going to listen, and then judgment's going to come. But then at the end, God says, I'm going to essentially start over after the people who aren't going to listen are taken away or wiped out or otherwise dealt with. Like in verse 11 of chapter 6, Isaiah asked, after receiving this encouraging news about how no one's going to listen to anything he has to say, he said, how long, Lord? Like, how long is this supposed to go on where I tell people your message and no one cares? And God said in verse 11, until cities lie ruined with no one living in them, until there are houses without people and the land is left devastated. The Lord will send the people far away, and the land will be completely abandoned. Even if 1/10 remain there, they will be burned again like a terebinth or an oak, which when it is cut down leaves a stump. Its stump is a holy seed. So he's given this image of like a tree. It's going to chop down. There's nothing left of it but this little stump. But this stump is a holy seed for a new beginning, so to speak. So God's saying, tell the people to repent and to fix their ways and to actually live like they love me. But it's not going to work and they're not going to listen. And I'm going to start over one day soon. And that's Isaiah's commission. Isn't that exciting?
What time period was that?
This is in like the mid 8th century BC. So like 740, 730 BC.
So who was ruling the Jews then?
Ahaz is the king of Judah. So Ahaz is not a good guy, right? Not a good guy at all. I get Ahaz and Ahab confused. So now I'll probably regret this one day. I just can't remember right now. Which one is it, Ahaz or Ahab, who wants Naboth's vineyard and his wife is Jezebel?
That's
Ahab?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
That's
Okay.
the bad.
I knew that. That was a test, and you all passed. What is this song? I never heard this song. Is it like a memory device?
Probably.
Sounds nice. All right. Well, so there we get to that. So Isaiah has been commissioned. So now we get to chapter 7. And this is what it says. This is the famous chapter where the prophecy of the young woman who will conceive and bring forth a son will be called Emmanuel. So this is an important chapter. And we can talk about what the woman is supposed to signify in Isaiah, and if it signifies the same thing as what Matthew says she signifies later. Are there two references or just one? So this is what we have, chapter 7. In the days of Ahaz, Jotham's son and grandson of Judah's king Uzziah, Aram's king Rezin and Israel's king Pekah, Remaliah's son, came up to attack Jerusalem, but they couldn't overpower it. All right, what is Israel? What country is Israel?
Northern Kingdom.
The northern. Okay, so this is not a good time for Israel. Remember how it was all nice and happy, and they were all supposed to be together and follow God and do what Moses said, that we spent 3-4 months going through Deuteronomy. Well, there were 26 lessons, so 6 months going through Deuteronomy. They're supposed to do all of that, but after Solomon died, his idiot son broke the kingdom in two because of his stubbornness. Israel, the northern kingdom and 10 tribes went off on their own, and the southern kingdom was left sort of by itself, which is Judah, who is Isaiah's prophesying to. And so now in the days of Ahaz, you have the northern kingdom allying with a pagan nation to attack the southern kingdom. So it sounds like things are really great, right? Things are really great with God's people. Moses would be proud. So not good, bad stuff. They're attacking, this is civil war, right? They're attacking each other. There's no sense of God brought us here, we're a family, none of that. It's just self-interest and everything else. So there's a problem. The southern kingdom's being attacked by two countries. If you're one country and you're being attacked by two countries, it's probably not a good thing. So bad. Verse 2, when the house of David was told that Aram had become allies with Ephraim, Ephraim is like a pet name for the northern kingdom, their hearts and the hearts of their people shook as the trees of a forest shake when there is a wind. Scared, frightened. But the Lord said to Isaiah, go out to meet Ahaz, the king of the southern kingdom, you and your son, Shear-Jashub, at the end of the channel of the upper pool by the road to the field where the laundry is washed. Really precise instructions. So I guess he's walking there at that moment. He's like, I want you to go out and talk to the king. This is where he is. And go speak to him right now and say this to him in verse 4. Be careful and stay calm. Don't fear and don't lose heart over these two pieces of smoking torches, over the burning anger of Rezin, Aram, and Remaliah's son. And he basically says in the next two verses that they have these grand plans to band together to destroy you and plunder your country and use it for their own purposes, but it's not going to work. So don't worry. Don't be afraid. Trust me. It's like God is using these evil actions to encourage the king and the people who will follow his example. Why don't you start trusting me? And a lot of things might start going better for you. And we can think about our own lives. Why don't we start trusting God instead of just saying it? Why don't we actually begin trusting God with our life? And a lot of things might actually start going better in our life if we trust God to help us. So this is what he wants Isaiah to tell him. Do not worry. Don't be afraid. Everything is going to be fine. And at the end of verse 9, he says, if you don't believe this, you can't be trusted. This is Isaiah channeling God, telling Ahaz. So Ahaz should be happy, right? Theoretically, he should believe God. He should trust God. He should be excited about this news. It looks like it's all over for you. It's not. Trust me. All of them are going to go away and there'll be nothing left of them. So it's going to work out just fine. Then we get to the famous prophecy in verse 10. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask a sign from the Lord your God, make it as deep as the grave or as high as heaven. So anything you want, right? Ask anything you want as a sign. What's the sign thing about? What's God telling him to do, asking him to do?
You want to know for sure, look for a sign.
Yeah, like you want to, I will show you that I'm serious. Ask anything you want and I'll make it happen. And it'll be a sign that I'm telling you the truth. Okay. Gideon wanted a sign. Jesus criticized people who wanted a sign, but still, is Ahaz a really pious guy? Is he a faithful, God-loving man? Ahaz? No, he's not. Okay, so he knows who he's dealing with, and he says, listen, I'll prove it to you. Just ask for anything you want, and I'll show you that I'm serious. But Ahaz said in verse 12, I won't ask, I won't test the Lord, which sounds really pious and nice, right? Sounds like something you should say, right? But God knows that he just doesn't trust God. That seems to be what's going on. Do you guys have any thoughts at all or anything? Okay. So Ahaz acts very pious, but based on what Isaiah says, God doesn't really buy that. Ahaz just doesn't trust God or doesn't trust Isaiah that Isaiah speaks for God. Maybe he just thinks of Isaiah as this strange weirdo who's talking to him, and he doesn't really believe that Isaiah has any connection with God at all. But for whatever reason, he's not sincere when he says these pious words. So in verse 13, then Isaiah said, listen, house of David. He's talking to the king of the southern kingdom who's descended from David and represents the entire kingdom. Listen, house of David, isn't it enough for you to be tiresome for people, that you are also tiresome before my God? Therefore, the Lord will give you a sign. The young woman or virgin is pregnant and is about to give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel. He'll eat butter and honey and learn to reject evil and choose good. Before the boy learns to reject good, evil and choose good, the land of the two kings you dread will be abandoned. So the northern kingdom and this other nation who banded together, they're gonna go away. The Lord will bring upon you, upon your people, and upon your families days unlike any that have come since the day Ephraim broke away from Judah, the king of Assyria. So he says, fine, if you don't want to ask for a sign, I will give you a sign. I'll give you a sign. And the sign will show that the sign will prove the nations are worried about, they're going to go away. The king of Assyria is going to be the one who wipes them off the face of the earth. So what is this sign? Who is the sign for? Is it for Matthew and for us to know that God made a prophecy that the Messiah would come? Or is the sign for Ahaz that God can be trusted and that he'll destroy the enemies who are threatening them?
It seemed like, obviously talking about Jesus, so certainly he wasn't going to be coming around anytime soon. So that sign he wouldn't even be alive for. So the sign wasn't for him, but it was for the Jews later.
Okay, that makes sense, right? I mean, if the sign is for Ahaz, but Ahaz wasn't, alive when Jesus came, it kind of doesn't do anything for him. So the sign must be for Ahaz. Does anyone else have any thoughts? Or does anyone disagree? Or does anyone have anything to offer? Because Matthew quotes this and says, this is about Jesus. But is it about Jesus? Well, it is, because Matthew said, but can there only be one reference, or are there two?
Too good with it.
Mhm.
No. There's two hands.
It does say that she will bear a son and will call his name Emmanuel, and Emmanuel is God with us.
Mhm. What does it say about what's going to happen when this kid is born? Does it give time frames between when something will happen so they can see it, or what's it say about the kid?
He won't have too many good things in this grocery store. Curds and honey is all he gets.
Well, the curds and honey might just mean that he eats really well.
I mean, it sort of goes along with John
Yeah.
Baptist, where he ate locusts and honey.
When in verse 16, when will these two kingdoms be destroyed that are threatening Israel? How old is this boy going to, is the boy going to be alive when this happens? And if so, roughly how old do you think he's going to be in verse 16?
Young,
Why? Why young?
before he knows right from wrong.
Okay, so we're talking about a real boy that's going to be born in Ahaz's lifetime. And before the kid's little, right? 1, 2, before the boy learns to reject evil and choose good, the land of the two kings you dread will be abandoned. So we're talking like a few years max. How old does a kid have to be before he can learn to reject evil and choose good?
Young, like 2.
Just old enough to know that's bad, do this. And then when that happens, verse 17, the Lord will bring upon you and upon your people, upon your families, the king of Assyria. He's going to be the one that will destroy the northern kingdom. And this is about 730-ish, maybe 740, no one's quite sure. And Assyria came and destroyed the northern kingdom in 722 BC. And that's a historical fact. It's gone. Within like 15 years or so of this prophecy being given, Assyria was like the new big guy on the block and came in and destroyed overtook all of the nations in the area and destroyed Israel, the northern kingdom, and carted everyone away. So it seems like there has to be like two meanings here. On the surface, it's a sign to the people at the time. You can trust God. He will take care of these people. Maybe you should trust him for a lot of other things too. Maybe you should start doing that while you're at it. God is with you. He'll protect you, sort of thing. But on another level, this is also a prophecy, Matthew says, of a young woman who's going to become pregnant and give birth to a son who will literally be God with us. And that's also a sign that God can be trusted. And maybe we should all trust him more than we are, sort of thing. Does anyone have any thoughts on Matthew? How he used this or anything at all?
Well, the only time that a virgin was able to bear a son was Jesus. So I still think that this is a prophecy back here of Jesus, because there would have been no other virgin birth.
Yeah, you're going to have to decide what it means. If it's only Jesus, then this makes no sense to Ahaz and has no meaning to him. It's like he's speaking Pig Latin. If it's only about Jesus, then this does nothing for Ahaz or anyone who he's talking to, like literally nothing. And all this talk about the boy won't know to reject good from evil, and whenever the boy's born, whenever this is, within a few years, it'll all be over. If it's not about more than just Jesus 700 years later, then none of this has any meaning for the people Isaiah is talking to. That's the problem you have to deal with. Ralph?
Well, Jesus too was born during the Roman reign. Rome was running everything at that time. Syria was long gone by then.
Yes, it was.
So I don't know how that fits into either, other than the fact that I have to agree that there's only one virgin birth and
Mhm.
only one God with us. Unless you're a Jehovah's Witness.
And, I translated, I've been desperately trying to cover this up, but I failed. I translated the passage for the special day we did on the Annunciation a month ago, but I can't remember which writer actually quotes Isaiah 7. And I said Matthew, but I can't find it. Where is it at? Does anyone know? Does anyone remember? I failed you all. It's not in Luke. What's it say? Hold on, where is it? 14, behold, Matthew 1:23 and Luke 1:31. Okay, let's go to Luke 1:31. Okay, so in Luke 1:31, thank you, the cross reference, you're a genius, Tim. How about that? Okay, so in Luke 1:26, this is what we read. When Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a city in Galilee, to a virgin who was engaged to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David's house. The virgin's name was Mary. When the angel came to her, he said, "Rejoice, favored one, the Lord is with you." That's right, this is the one where I translated it as celebrate, special lady. But anyway, she was confused by these words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. The angel said, "Don't be afraid, Mary, God is honoring you. Look, you'll conceive and give birth to a son, and you'll name him Jesus. He'll be great, and he'll be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of David, his father." It doesn't quite quote it. It must be from Matthew. Matthew 1:23. Matthew actually quotes it directly. Luke just sort of melts it in there. Okay, Matthew 1:21. She will give birth to a son. You'll call him Jesus, because he'll save his people from their sins. Now, all of this took place so what the Lord had spoken through the prophet would be fulfilled. Look, a virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel. So Matthew says this happened to fulfill what Isaiah spoke about. So, and you can, no one's, it's not going to, I don't think it'll make a meaningful difference if you disagree, but I think the best way to understand what Isaiah is saying in Isaiah 7 is that there are two references. There's an immediate reference for Ahaz and the folks who are around at that time, that God is with them, and this boy who's going to be born is going to be proof of this. And then before the boy is more than a year or two old, then Assyria will destroy everything and destroy the two nations they're so terrified of. But the more meaningful reference is to Jesus, who's going to come and be literally God with us, focusing on the miraculous conception of Jesus that Matthew quotes. Any thoughts? Everyone's so quiet. Need more coffee. You know, I saw a news story. I'm not recommending this for church, but I saw a news story that an Nespresso plant in France received a huge shipment of beans from, I'm guessing from a South American country. And there's tons of white powder mixed in with the beans. And what had happened was people were smuggling cocaine in with the coffee shipments in the pallets, and the cocaine bags had broken open. And so there's cocaine mixed in with the espresso beans. And as I read that, I'm thinking whoever drank that coffee probably got a lot done. That made me think of, I wonder why everyone's so quiet here. So, but I'm not saying coffee and cocaine are good for church. I'm just saying that maybe we should have coffee. The Nespresso, in the news story I read, the Nespresso people said that the coffee beans had not been contaminated. I don't know about that. I don't know. I was like, what are you gonna do? Take a hose, put it on the shower function, just rinse them off and then repackage them? I don't know about that.
Sales picked up quite a bit after that.
Maybe they did pick up. Maybe they did. But I don't have Nespresso, so I have no firsthand knowledge about anything like that. But you have to do something with the prophecy here. It's about Jesus, absolutely, absolutely. If it's not also about something here for Ahaz and the folks who are talking to Isaiah, then it has no meaning. So the point is, Ahaz is supposed to trust God, that he'll protect his people. The temple's in the southern kingdom. God literally still dwells there inside the Holy of Holies. He'll protect his people if they actually trust him, believe in him. And he's using this threat as, you know, when awful things happen in your life, you're tempted to push aside stupid things that used to be so important until 5 minutes ago, but now all of a sudden things really come into focus. So God's using this in a similar way. Everyone's terrified. They can't stand up against these two countries that are coming at them. So God sends Isaiah to talk to Ahaz and say, listen, I'll protect you. I'll protect you. Just trust me. And Ahaz is like, and God says, I'll prove it to you. Ask for anything. I want you just to trust me. And then maybe you can start reorienting your priorities then. And Ahaz is like, oh no, I can't test you. God's like, you make me sick. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I'll tell you what the sign will be. A young woman or virgin, your translation it can be either. It could be either in Isaiah. Will conceive, she'll give birth to a son. Before the kid's more than a year too old, the two nations you're afraid of will be taken out and destroyed. There, okay? That's the sign. That's the sign. And we start in verse 18. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
But that doesn't help him at the moment. Does that make, I mean.
No, it doesn't.
They're still going to.
Yeah, it just lets him know when his enemies are going to be destroyed, but it doesn't help him like with what's happening.
What's happening right at that moment.
You're right. You're right. It doesn't.
See, I told you that God doesn't be the sign. I don't believe in God. You hear that all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't settle it right
So
now.
We're talking
15, 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
So it, I guess it gives him hope for the future if he believes God. That doesn't help him right at the moment.
But what we do know is that they didn't succeed. I mean, they might have bound together to harass and attack, do cross-border raids and stuff like that. But the coalition never conquered the southern kingdom. Never. So my guess, I actually hadn't thought about that till you mentioned it, which is why it's nice to have discussion. My guess is that no, it didn't help them at the moment, but God protected them by not letting them be overrun by this two-nation coalition. And then 15-ish years or so later, when Assyria came and destroyed the northern kingdom and a bunch of others, it's sort of a confirmatory sign that I told you. But you're right, it didn't immediately alleviate the immediate problem. It sort of kept them at arm's length and didn't destroy them for a little while, though. So you're right. All right. Finish 7 and 8 go together. So I think we'll get through 8 today, because it's pretty simple. On that, so starting in chapter 7, verse 18, on the day when Assyria is destroyed, when Assyria destroys them, the Lord will whistle for the flies from the remotest streams of Egypt and for the bees that are in the land of Assyria. They'll come and settle in the steep ravines and the cracks of the cliffs, in all the thorn bushes and in all the watering holes. What on earth is that supposed to mean? What does that mean? Does anyone have any idea? Is he literally saying that he's going to whistle and a million bees are going to come and hide somewhere? What's he saying?
No, he's saying that their enemies are going to completely overrun their land. At least that's what my version.
It's like what I think it's saying. Let me give. Does your translation say something different?
Yeah, my translation just does away with the flies and just says, in that day, the Lord will whistle for the army of Upper Egypt and the army of Assyria, and says they'll be like flies and bees. But he just says that. But the NKJV, from what I remember, actually says they're flies.
Yeah. So he's like picture the armies that he's going to use to destroy this coalition. They're so numerous. They're like a hive of bees swarming everywhere, or flies swarming everywhere, and he's just picturing them as that. He's saying, the day when these nations are destroyed, I'm going to bring foes to destroy them. They're going to be really, really numerous. Let's see. On that day, verse 20, the Lord will shave with a razor that is hired beyond the river, with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and sweep away the beard also, saying that seems to give this imagery of total. What do you guys think it's saying? This razor imagery. We're not speaking literally here. This is all this imagery about destruction and everything else. No insight on the razors?
Well, he's gonna cut them down. He's gonna
Like,
mow them
okay.
down. I mean, make it clean it up.
Okay.
I guess, when you kind of, right?
It is satisfying to mow a messy lawn, though. I mean, it really is. Sammy, what were you going to say?
Basically the same thing.
Yeah, or it could mean, and I don't have a strong preference either way. I think we get what he's saying. It could mean if your beard is shaved, it's a sign of humiliation and disgrace. So he could be talking about how he's going to make them look like me. He's going to shave their head and get rid of their beard, and they'll just be these fresh-faced guys who are in disgrace because their beards have been chopped off. Like, I'm going to destroy these people. You can take it as I'm going to cut them all down, or you can take them as I'm going to humiliate them. Either way, it's not good. In that day, verse 21, a man will keep alive a young cow and 2 sheep, and because of the abundance of milk that they give, he'll eat curds. For everyone who's left in the land will eat curds and honey. So prosperity, things are going to be really good after these nations are destroyed. On that day, there will be thorns and thistles in every place where 1,000 vines worth 1,000 silver shekels once grew. Only those with bows and arrows will go there, because the entire land will become thorns and thistles. As for the hills that were once formed with hoes, you won't go there for fear of the thorns and thistles. They'll become places where the cattle are turned loose and sheep wander. These nations that are so powerful, the northern kingdom and the people going against you, they'll just be overgrown with sticker bushes. Like those, I mentioned this before, go on the internet and Google abandoned houses in Detroit or something.
Yeah.
You'll see these mansions overgrown and taken over again by the lawns that used to be nice and just totally destroyed. So that's the image you're going to get of such luxury. These are wealthy, powerful countries, and they're all going to be cut down and be just ruins one day soon. You'll be prosperous, there'll be nothing. Everything is going to be wonderful. Any thoughts? Or should we just move on to verse 8, to chapter 8? Okay, fine. We need some of that Nespresso coffee. Then the Lord said to me, so now we're gonna go back to the idea of who's the boy? Who is this boy? The Lord said to me, take a large tablet and write on it in common characters. He wants him to write on the tablet, quote, belonging to Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz, which is a great name, and if everyone should just use it. The name means something. It means the spoil speeds, or the spoil hastens and the prey hastens. That would be a good password. That would be. Yeah, it's names mean something. So it's like sort of giving this impression, disaster's coming, right? And I will get reliable witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah, to attest for me. And I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. Then the Lord said to me, call his name Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz. Why? Why is he to be called a name that means basically it's all over for you guys? Who's it all over for? Why should we call him this name? Verse 4, for before the boy knows how to cry, my father or my mother, young kid, the wealth of Damascus, Syria, and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. Is this the boy that was spoken of in chapter 7, verse 14? There is a boy, he's conceived. Before he's old enough to do much of anything, Assyria will come and destroy Damascus, Syria, and the northern kingdom, which is exactly what Isaiah said a boy who would be born would do in chapter 7, verse 14. So, is this the boy, or is this some other boy that has no connection to anything that's been spoken about? Who knows? Well, I will give you a spoiler. I think it's the boy from Isaiah 7. I also think Isaiah 7 refers to Jesus in a deeper, more complete way. But this seems to be the boy. His name signified, this is the sign. This is the sign that God's going to destroy these people. The boy's name means that spoil hastens and the prey is coming. The bad guys are coming. That's what the boy's name means. He went to the woman, she conceived, the boy's born before he's old enough to even speak, or you might say before he knows right from wrong. Assyria will destroy the two nations we fear. Some people think it's unconnected, and you can take that view if you like. I just think that
No, Rome is still in there. Is Rome not in charge or what?
no, Rome is not even alive at this point.
We're talking about Jesus, right?
No, I'm talking about Isaiah 8.
You're referring back to the boy who
Mhm.
knew right, who knew right and wrong,
Uh-huh, yeah,
who was probably Jesus, we agreed on that.
maybe. Well, was Jesus in some sense, but is this boy in Isaiah 8 the boy that Isaiah was talking about? Or is the boy in Isaiah 8 have nothing to do with what he said in chapter 7, verse 14? That's the question.
My issue just deals with the virgin birth. It's not a virgin. This wasn't a virgin birth.
Mayor Kalash.
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah.
So I mean, as far as we know, Jesus didn't have that many names. But coming from a virgin birth, we knew that he was called God with us, we know that he was called Jesus. And he had a few other names, but this other name doesn't seem to jive with who he is, a person.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying. There's two different ways of taking this. Number one is that the kid in Isaiah 7 who's prophesied about has nothing to do with anything that happens in Isaiah. It's just about Jesus, period, end of story, for reasons that Tim mentioned and that you're mentioning. The other view is that Isaiah is talking about, there are two references, a near reference and a far reference. The near one is the boy that's born in chapter 8 who does literally everything Isaiah 7 said. And the far reference, the deeper reference, is to Jesus, who is God with us, who came to save us from our enemies, like the enemies that Ahaz is dealing with, sort of foreshadow. What were you saying, Tim? Your main issue did you want to talk about it, or you just want to move on?
No, I don't want to move on. It was just
Okay.
about the virgin birth, and this wasn't a virgin birth. I mean, it's like, it's almost another, this is almost another prophecy or another part of the prophecy.
Okay,
That's all. I just
yeah,
don't totally agree with the idea that this is the person that's talking about.
yeah, I see what you're saying. We could talk more, but we can move on. Just know that whatever you want, if you don't want to make Isaiah 7 about anything that happens in Isaiah's time, then it does nothing for Ahaz. That's the issue from the other side. Why is Isaiah even telling this to them? So that 700 years later, after they've been dead and there's nothing left of them but maybe bones that haven't been dragged away by animals, Jesus could be born. So either there's more could be said, but you have to figure out what Isaiah 8, is this boy a different boy? So anyway.
Sounds like it. It sounds like, because of the name.
Well, Jesus wasn't actually called Emmanuel. If you want to go with that, Jesus was never called Emmanuel. It's not his name,
God with us,
because he is with us.
right?
Yeah.
Which means translated,
Jesus has many.
according to Matthew, this is what translated means. So how can you translate something that isn't so?
Well, his name is Emmanuel, meaning it's not literally his name, but it signifies a truth. He is with us. Like Meher Shalahashbaz is his name, but the real meaning is that it's a sign that Assyria is going to destroy all the people who are threatening them. So it's an interesting conundrum. Were you going to say something, Tim?
In 3, they're referring to, if this is a prophecy,
Mhm.
they refer to Mary as a prophetess.
That's not what mine says, but yeah, that's what. I have interest.
Is that what yours says?
Is this verse 3, the beginning of verse 3?
Yes.
Mine just says he slept with his wife. That's all it says. I don't know what. Well, he's a prophet, so maybe they're referring to his wife as a prophetess for whatever reason. I have no idea.
No, I wasn't
I
gonna
don't know. I don't know, because we're saying that there could be a parallel
Yeah,
here. I don't know exactly what the definition of a prophetess is, but I didn't picture Mary as a prophetess.
yeah, the promise has nothing to do with the status of the woman in that sense. The promise just said a young woman or a virgin will conceive and bring forth a son, and you'll call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. That's the promise. And you could, I think you can see it fulfilled in one sense in Isaiah 8, but certainly in Jesus.
Because here Isaiah approached perhaps and hopefully his wife. She conceived and gave birth to a son.
Yeah. Maybe it was their wedding night, Tim.
No, because he already had a son that he had to go and talk to Ahaz.
That's why the word in Isaiah 7 doesn't have to mean a woman who has had no relations. It could simply mean young woman. But we know it refers to Jesus. Whether it refers to the boy in Isaiah 8, you can all just trust me. That's a joke. It certainly refers to Jesus. We know that for absolute certainty. What we can certainly say is in Isaiah 8, there is a boy who is born, and his name and his existence is a sign and puts a timetable on when the nations who are troubling them will be taken care of. We can certainly say that, whether it's the fulfillment of Isaiah 7, I leave it to you and your conscience. But there's the boy. Isaiah chapter 8, verse 5. The Lord spoke again to me, since this people has rejected the waters of Shiloah that flow gently, and instead rejoices over Rezin and Remaliah's son. Therefore, look, the Lord is raising up against them the powerful floodwaters of the Euphrates, the king of Assyria in all his glory. It'll rise up over all its channels, overflowing all its banks, and sweep into Judah, flooding, overflowing, and reaching up to the neck, not drowning, almost drowning. Assyria never conquered the southern kingdom. They dominated the southern kingdom and exacted tribute and money, but they never militarily conquered them and destroyed them. They left them and just let them be sort of pathetic vassal states to pay tribute to them. But they left them to have some sort of illusion of independence. So that's why you have this image of the floodwaters almost drowning them, but not quite. But God is with us. The span of his wings will cover the width of the land. Assyria is going to come, almost destroy you, but God will protect you, the southern kingdom. God will protect you from being destroyed, unlike your brothers and sisters in the north. So verse 9, unite yourselves, peoples, and be shattered. Listen, all distant places of the earth. Prepare to be shattered, prepare to be shattered. Create a plan, but be frustrated. Speak a word, but it won't stand, for God is with us. The Lord spoke to me, taking hold of me and warning me not to walk in the way of this people. So now God's sort of pulling Isaiah aside. He's just finished sort of declaring what's going to happen. Now you can almost picture like a private conversation God's having with Isaiah about surviving and keeping his sanity in a really messed up situation. The Lord spoke to me, taking hold of me and warning me not to walk in the way of this people. Don't call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy. Don't fear what they fear, and don't be terrified. It's the Lord of heavenly forces whom you should hold sacred, whom you should fear, and whom you should hold in awe. God will become a sanctuary, but he'll be a stone to trip over and a rock to stumble on for the two houses of Israel, and a trap and a snare for those living in Jerusalem. Many of them will stumble and fall and be broken, snared, and captured. And he goes on, and I'll wrap up because I know people are coming in. He goes on and is essentially saying that God is, in some sense, judging the people. He's giving Isaiah more information about how his ministry will go. They are not going to listen to you. Ahaz didn't listen to you. Other people aren't going to listen to you. God has decided to judge his people. He's going to bring judgment on them. And it's going to be a dark time. You, Isaiah, are going to be a pastor, a prophet in a really challenging time. And he's trying to help him prepare himself to deal with all of the messiness he's going to have to deal with. And chapter 8 ends with a promise of judgment, and darkness. 21, they'll pass through the land dejected and hungry, and when they are hungry, they'll be enraged and will curse their God and King. They'll turn toward heaven and look to the earth, but they will see only distress and darkness, random movement, and the anguish and doom of banishment. But remember, the chapter divisions aren't real. They're just put in there because chapter 9 is a famous passage about hope, and he continues right on. Unfortunately, we just have to stop here and continue next week. But Ahaz's response is sort of an embryo representation of the state of the people. They're supposed to love God, but this is what they got. This is their king. This is the descendant from David. This is what they got. And it's just a mess. And if the king is such a mess, everyone else is an even bigger mess, because he sets the tone, the tempo, the spiritual temperature for the rest of the people. This is a picture of a guy who's been commissioned to speak to people who will not care and won't listen and aren't going to listen. But it's also a picture of, despite his people's unfaithfulness, God is still perfectly faithful to keep his promises and to make good on them, even when his people hate him and ignore him and are hypocrites. And chapter 9 begins climbing out of the valley of darkness and bleakness that 8 ended at, with a famous prophecy. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, a light of the Lord that's going to come to people all over the world, even to Gentiles, who are going to rejoice before him and who are going to rejoice in this child that's born to them.